At least 9 people have been killed, and more than a dozen are injured. This is the result of Russia's brutal attack on a Ukrainian hospital in Sumy. The first missile fell at 7:30 a.m., the second an hour later, while patients were being evacuated. Only force can force Russia to make peace, Volodymyr Zelenskiy wrote on social media. The Ukrainian president has spent the past week in the United States discussing possible scenarios for ending the war in Ukraine. This is another example of barbarism on the long list of sins of the Russian invaders. This time their target was a medical center in Sumy, in northeastern Ukraine. When the evacuation of 86 patients began this morning after the first explosion, the Russians struck a second time. At least 9 people were killed and more than a dozen wounded. This is in Kryvyi Rih, in central Ukraine, and the bloody result of the air attack. 3 people died in the rubble, 6 were injured. Dozens of residential buildings, including a nearby school, were completely destroyed. Ukraine has been fighting for almost 950 days, but without international support, primarily from the United States, the fight is getting harder.
Россия понимает только силу.
The only thing Russia understands is force. It always has. Once there was an attempt to make concessions to Hitler by giving up the Czech Republic and Silesia. Did that stop him? By no means. And that's the message Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy came to the United States with. He met with Donald Trump yesterday.
It has to end at some point. It has to end. He's gone through hell, and his country has gone through hell like few countries have ever, like it's happened anywhere. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. It's a terrible situation.
After the meeting, Zelensky said Trump shares the view that Putin can't win and Ukraine must win. For what it's worth, a day earlier at a meeting at the White House, President Joe Biden briefed the Ukrainian delegation on another $8 billion aid package. The funds are to go toward additional air defense, drones, and munitions. What's more, the Pentagon has been ordered to expand training for Ukraine F-16 pilots.
We have to support Ukraine in its path to membership to both the EU and to NATO, and continue to make reforms to counter corruption and strengthen democracy, which you're working mightily on right now. We have to ensure Ukraine has sufficient capabilities, and I mean sufficient capabilities, to defend against future Russian aggression.
Volodymyr Zelenskiy heard similar assurances from Vice President and Democratic candidate in the upcoming elections, Kamala Harris. The topic of rebuilding Ukraine and laying the groundwork for a Marshall Plan for Kiev was the main issue of the meeting of leaders of more than 30 countries. Poland was represented by President Andrzej Duda. This mini-summit was held on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. Volodymyr Zelenskiy did not hide his satisfaction with the results of his talks in Washington, D.C. and New York. All in all, it was a busy, long, extremely important week in America. As we planned, we are going back home after all the necessary negotiations. And all the negotiations went exactly as Ukraine needed them to. These words give hope to soldiers in the trenches, and above all, to civilians who are anxiously awaiting the deterioration in weather conditions and the approaching winter.